In this video, I'm going to be covering how to add simple audio objects to our scene in Unity. So just to show you what I've done so far in the Assets window, I've gone ahead and imported a sound file. This is a .wav file, but a .mp3, a .aif, any of these things will work. So you can bring in your favorite song, or you could go online and find a sound effect or something like that. And that was just really simple to do. I just right-clicked and said import new asset and found my audio file. So whenever I select the audio file in the assets window, the inspector comes up, and I have a bunch of different options. I can force it to mono, meaning right now it's a stereo file, so this is the left ear and the right ear, and I can change it so that it's a mono file. Load in background, which isn't really relevant to us, and there's some other types of settings here, such as the quality, which we could downgrade if the file's too large. Audio files can get really, really big. It can actually be one of the largest files in the game, and in fact, in a lot of games, you'll see if they have like multiple languages, for example, recorded for voiceovers, they'll be, possibly tens of gigabytes larger simply because they have all that extra audio. So I'm going to leave all this stuff the same. And there's a couple of different ways to apply audio. So I could apply audio directly onto an object and make that object, quote, emit audio, or I can drag and drop my audio as an object into my scene. So I'm going to do that just to show you how that works. So I'm going to click and drag my WAV file up into my hierarchy and release, and it's dropped my audio file into the scene. I'm going to just hit F on the keyboard to reframe the audio file. So this game object, which I'm going to rename really quickly to audio, pretty simple. It has two components. It's got the typical transform component to give us our 3D space, and it has the audio source component. So an audio source component allows us to emit audio from whatever object we have this component added to. So here's the clip that we're using. This is the name of the audio file. The output, which we're actually not going to be using in this. This is if we were directly pushing it to a mixer. We have mute, turn that on and off. We have some bypasses, play on awake, which means is it going to automatically play whenever the scene loads, or do we need to start it playing through scripting or some other type of process? And then loop. So do we want our audio to play over and over and over again, or do we want it to just play once? I'm going to go ahead and check that to loop it. Here's the volume. Now we can't necessarily raise the volume, so it's pretty important to raise the volume before you bring it into Unity. There are ways around this where you can add like gain and things like that, but I'd recommend raising your audio before you pull it into Unity because you can always make it lower in here. We can repitch it, so meaning I can make it sound higher or lower pitched. I can pan the stereo, meaning I can move it from the left ear to the right ear. Spatial blend, which right now we have a 2D sound, and I'll cover what that is in just a second. And the reverb zone, which we're not going to get into in this class, but basically you can add a reverb zone so audio changes based on where the player is. So let's say the player moves into a cave, the audio changes and it sounds different whenever it's in a cave or inside versus outside. So we have this audio file. I'm going to hit play on my game. And I can hear the audio file. I'm not sure if it'll be too audible on your end, but basically it's just a simple kind of like science fiction sound. Almost sounds like cars racing by. So this is a 2D audio file, which basically means this sound can be heard anywhere in our scene. If I have it in the scene, it's playing everywhere. And as I move my character around, the sound isn't going to change. So if I hit play and start moving around, it's always the same volume. Now there is this spatial blend which I can move from 2D to 3D, and once I move it to 3D, we're actually working with a true three-dimensional sound that has a range. As I zoom out, you can see the range here. This is the limit of the range, and it's going to sound louder the closer we get to this actual object. So I'll just make that a little bit larger so you can see that. So there's sort of two different ranges. There's the max distance and the min distance. So if we're closer than a certain distance, it's always going to be as loud as possible. You can see the volume charted here. So if we're right next to it, it's going to be really loud. And as we get further away, it's going to get quieter and quieter and quieter. Let's go ahead and just lower this max distance, which I can either do by selecting this sphere and dragging it in, or by just dragging and changing this value here. So I'm going to just drag it in a bit, and what I'll do is I will make it so that the audio only affects half of our plane right here. I'm just going to move my view around and just kind of see where that's situated. That looks pretty good to me. So I'm not going to hear the audio at all until I enter this sphere, and then it's going to get progressively louder as I move towards the edge. So I'll hit play, and I can just barely hear it. And now it's getting louder. And on the right-hand side, if you pay attention, you can see my little listener icon getting closer and further away. So this is great for testing. So as I get closer, it's louder and louder. As I get further away, it's less loud. There's plenty of settings in here that we can shift. We can actually grab these different points and choose how the sound scales based on where we are. It's not an audio engineering course, so I'm not going to go too deep into that, but that's definitely something to investigate if sound is an aspect of game design that really interests you. So this can also be added to objects themselves. So let's go ahead and hit create, and I'm going to just make a simple sphere, and I'm going to toss the sphere over here. And this sphere, you can say add component, and I can add an audio source component, or alternatively, this is the simplest way, you can just drag and drop the audio file onto the inspector window as you have that selected, and it'll add it as an audio source automatically. So this looks good. I'll make sure it loops, and I'll hit play. And what's going to happen is this object is now emitting that sound. So if I had this object animated, for example, and it was moving back and forth, we could have it getting quieter and louder, so we can associate sounds with different objects in different spaces. The final note that I want to talk about with sound is on the FPS controller we have these footstep sounds, which personally I just can't stand. So what I want you to do, I mean, this is up to you, but I would highly suggest this. I would remove the sounds from the character or replace them with something else. So all of these are tied to different audio files, and I can twirl down footstep sounds and say, okay, let's associate this. I can click this little circle to find a different file. I can associate it with my own custom footstep sound, or I could just hit none to remove that sound altogether. So I'm just going to remove those two. I'll leave the jump and the land sound on, and I'll hit play. And trust me, it's going to be much, much better now that we have nothing, no loud footsteps, and I can jump up and down.